The first time I heard the shrill roar of an ATV tearing through my soybean field at sunrise, I figured some teenager had gotten lost, or maybe a bored farm kid was blowing off steam by tearing up my crop rows. But when I stepped outside in my pajamas and spotted a grown woman in oversized designer sunglasses blasting music from a Bluetooth speaker strapped to her handlebars, I knew two things immediately. First, this wasn't an accident, and second, she was definitely coming back. I didn't know her name yet, but that morning she waved at me like she owned the land, even as she crushed half an acre of young sprouts under her wheels. By the time I reached the porch to shout, she was gone, leaving behind snapped stalks, torn up soil, and the unmistakable scent of strawberry vamp. That's when I realized, this wasn't going to end with a simple fence or a neighborly chat. This was headed for horns, real ones. I tried to be reasonable, I really did. The next day, I walked over to the closest house and knocked, hoping to find someone sane to talk to. A teenager answered the door and called for his aunt. When she showed up, I recognized her immediately of the sunglasses, the attitude, and an ATV helmet hanging off her elbow like some kind of trophy. She leaned against the doorway with the expression of someone being forced to watch grass grow. I calmly explained she was damaging my crops, trespassing, and risking legal trouble. She shrugged. I asked her nicely to stop. She smirked. Then she told me, "Prove it." That's when it clicked. She wasn't just a reckless thrill seeker. She was a full-blown entitlement storm in yoga pants. Her name was Amanda, but she introduced herself with the classic Karen mantra, "I'm friends with the mayor and the Hope president, so you might want to back off." I blinked. She stared. Then she declared that my field was dull and empty and that she'd be back tomorrow. It was the kind of encounter that left your jaw hanging open long after the door slammed shut. My blood pressure spiked every time I thought about Ita, and I thought about it a lot, especially the next morning, when the engine screamed back across my land. This time, she brought her dog, riding shotgun in a milk tray duct taped to the back of the ATV. For the next week, it felt like I was trapped inside some twisted video game. I was the slow-moving obstacle, and she was the boss level with infinite lives. No matter what time I stepped outside, she was tearing up the soil, flattening irrigation flags, weaving through scarecrow posts like she was in some off-road competition. I tried taking photos as she flipped me off. I put up signs as she ran them over. Once, I even saw her laughing and live-streaming the chaos from her phone. I reported her to the sheriff's office, but all I got was a lazy promise to look into it. Turns out the mayor's niece had more legal padding than a diplomat with a get-out-of-jail-free card. Every attempt to reason with her just seemed to fuel her ego, and then it escalated. She started inviting friends. One morning, I counted 3 ATVs ripping through my crops like it was their own private motocross track. They brought coolers, set up folding chairs under my oak tree, and treated my land like their personal park. When her unleashed dogs started chasing my chickens, I called animal control. They said they'd make a note. I strung up barbed wire. They ran it over. By the end of the second week, I'd lost nearly 10% of my crop and my sanity was hanging by a thread. Then came the final straw, or, more accurately, the final tire. A heavy rain had soaked the ground the night before, turning the lower field into a mud pit thick enough to eat boots. That morning, I stepped outside, coffee in hand, and heard the familiar engine growl. Amanda was back. Only this time, her ATV wasn't moving. It had sunk halfway into the trench I'd been prepping for a new irrigation line. She was now perched atop my scarecrow post, screaming into her phone and flailing like she was being hunted by wild animals. And in a way, she was. That's when I saw Ida, something massive, brown, and snorting pushing through the tall grass. It looked like a dragon with hay fever. It was the first time in years I'd seen the beast stir. Beast wasn't his actual name. His name was Toro, a retired rodeo bull I'd adopted after he was deemed too stubborn for the circuit. Towering, jet black with a bold white blaze on his forehead, Toro had the kind of bulk that could turn a car into a pancake. Normally, he stayed in the upper pasture, well away from the crops, but thanks to the rain and a broken latch, he'd found his way down to the southern field, and there he was, calm, imposing, and locked in a silent standoff with Amanda, whose ATV was stuck in the mud while she clung to the scarecrow post like a cat up a tree. She screamed. I sipped my coffee. Toro didn't charge ya, he just stared. Calm, curious, possibly judging. Amanda, on the other hand, lost it. She started shouting at me, threatening to sue, hurling insults I won't repeat. I smiled and offered her a rope. She refused, choosing instead to call her boyfriend, her lawyer, and at one point, I'm pretty sure he a psychic. Toro eventually turned and walked away, unimpressed. But the damage was done. Amanda had been rattled, if only temporarily, and I'd captured the whole scene on my field cam. After that, the joyride stopped, not out of newfound respect, but because Amanda was now convinced the bull was stalking her. She started calling the police on me, claiming I'd trained an animal to hunt her. Animal control came out again, this time laughing as they watched the footage. They confirmed Toro had done nothing wrong but warned that if I intentionally used him to scare people, I could be liable. I nodded, smiled, and began planning something a little more deliberate. Because Amanda would be back, I knew that much. And when she returned, I wouldn't be counting on luck or muddy ground. Next time, I'd be ready with bait, with cameras, and with a bull that didn't need a reason to charge. This wasn't just a dispute anymore, it was a full-blown showdown. My land, my bull, her arrogance. And this time, karma wasn't going to walk away quietly, it was going to roar in, horns first. The silence after Amanda's ATV got stuck lasted 2 days, just long enough for me to reseed the trench she'd carved into my west crop row, long enough to let myself believe naively that maybe, just maybe, she'd learned her lesson. Maybe being stranded on a scarecrow post while a 1-ton bull stared her down had finally knocked some sense into her. I should have known better. Entitled people don't back down if they regroup. And Amanda came back not with an ATV this time, but with threats, noise, and enough passive aggression to spoil milk. It started at the feed store, where I'd been shopping for years. I walked in to buy some fencing supplies and was greeted by awkward glances from the clerk and hushed whispers by the chick brooder. Then, without warning, Amanda stormed in a yoga gear, muddy boots, and the dramatic flair of someone auditioning for a reality show. She marched to the counter, pointed directly at me, and declared loudly that I was a menace to the community. Claimed I had a trained attack bull, that I was some kind of livestock lunatic terrorizing innocent women. She demanded the store stop selling me supplies. The place went dead quiet. Then the manager, a man who'd known me for 2 decades, looked her in the eye and politely asked her to leave before he called the cops. She stormed out, muttering something about Yelp reviews and legal action. That afternoon, I found 3 new envelopes in my mailbox, one from the Ho, one from Animal Control, and one from the law office with a name that sounded like a contestant on a reality dating show. The whole letter accused me of creating an unsafe environment by allowing aggressive agricultural elements to roam free. I had to read that line 3 times, then laughed so hard I nearly choked on my iced tea. The animal control notice was yet another complaint Amanda had filed, claiming Toro had been weaponized. The legal letter was a cease and desist, written in such sloppy legalese it read like a third-rate chatbot had pieced it together between naps. I tacked all 3 to the fridge under a magnet shaped like a cow. New decor. That's when I decided I was done playing defense. If Amanda wanted drama, I'd give her a stage she couldn't handle. My first move was petty, I'll admit that, but when someone keeps joyriding a 4-wheeled wrecking ball through your livelihood, maturity takes a backseat to impact. I ordered a dozen garden gnomes on Linnean, not the charming kind. These were grotesque little beasts, hand-painted with scowls and twisted grins. I lined them up right where Amanda usually entered the field. Each gnome held a different tool, one with a shovel, one with a rake, one with a tiny sign that read, "Trespassers will be killed." It was absurd. That was the point. Amanda's reaction was everything I hoped for. I didn't even have to see it live via my field cam, caught it all. She approached on foot, spotted the gnomes, screamed something unintelligible, and kicked the first one so hard it flew 10 feet and shattered. Then she tripped over another and fell straight into the mud, shoulder to knee in swampy sludge. I laughed until my ribs ached. Naturally, she used it as ammo. Another complaint, this time accusing me of setting up harmful law and copyright core with intent to injure. I printed a still from the footage of her fall, framed it, and hung it on the wall. Title: Karma Takes a Tumble. Next, I went for practical deterrents. I spent the weekend digging mock trenches in the field just shallow enough to rattle an ATV's wheels but not hurt anyone. I spaced them unevenly, covered them lightly with straw, and waited. But Amanda was like a cockroach in a demolition derby. Nothing slowed her down. At one point, her ATV actually caught air over a trench like it was a stunt ramp. She landed sideways, tipped, but somehow didn't crash. I started to suspect she wasn't fueled by gasoline, but by pure, undiluted entitlement. And it wasn't just my land anymore. Neighbors started asking questions. One woman caught me at the gas station, asking if I knew who kept tearing through the back trail behind her barn. Another said their dog had chased an ATV off their property late at night, and the rider screamed something about being harassed. The pieces were falling into place. Amanda wasn't just trespassing, she was building a private off-road network through the whole neighborhood. It was time to hit her with something undeniable. I installed new trail cams, Akairis, night vision, motion activated. I even disguised one inside an old weatherproof birdhouse. Within a week, I had enough footage to make a documentary. There she was at sunrise, drifting between crop rows, circling hay bales, posing for selfies with my cows like they were part of a petting zoo. One clip caught her tossing an empty soda can into my compost pile. Another showed her dog digging a hole in my vegetable patch. She treated my land like a theme park crossed with a landfill. But the real kicker came when I spotted something glinting on the roof of my workshop. A small camera, not mine. I climbed up, checked it out, and sure enough it was live streaming to a cloud app. Amanda had planted surveillance on my property, probably hoping to catch me doing something she could twist into retaliation. I yanked the camera, turned it toward the road, and let it record the neighbor's sprinkler system and a row of plastic flamingos. Hope she enjoyed the footage. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed. The gnomes were fun, the trenches were cute, but I wanted something bigger, poetic. It was time to bring Toro back. Not recklessly, strategically. Amanda had stomped all over my patience. Now it was time to let the bull do the stomping. I wasn't going to sit around and hope for another lucky mud trap. I was going to bait her in. This time, she wouldn't be able to play the victim. She'd walk straight into the horns willingly. Toro hadn't seen real action in years. He was once the kind of bull announcers whispered about, a half-legend, half-freight train. Riders prayed they wouldn't draw his name. After retiring, he bounced to a rancher friend who couldn't handle him. That's how he ended up with me. Too ornery, too smart, too dangerous for anyone else. At first, he hated people, hated noise, would charge anything with wheels. I kept him penned up far from my working fields. It took 6 months before he let me within 10 feet without snorting like a steam engine. But eventually, we found mutual ground. Toro wasn't a pet far from idle, but there was respect, a truce. And now, with Amanda tearing up my land like it was a racetrack, Toro's moment had come. I didn't just set him loose like some cartoon villain. I trained him, I conditioned him. Every time Amanda's engine screamed across my property, I brought Toro to the fence line, let him watch. Every time he snorted or stomped, I gave him a treat. His instincts flared like muscle memory for rage. Within days, he was pacing the fence every morning, waiting. I didn't even need to do much. Amanda was training my bull for me with every rev of her ATV, and she had no idea. That weekend, the local community held a small barbecue at the neighborhood park just down the road. Nothing fancy, just folding tables, a grill, and folks from surrounding properties coming together. I brought some corn and a couple of pies, planning for a quiet evening. Then Amanda showed up, wearing a jacket emblazoned with "Ride Free" in rhinestones, and immediately started spinning her usual tale about the trauma she'd suffered on my field. She claimed I'd weaponized livestock, accused me of being a public menace, and insisted her therapist had diagnosed her with bull-induced stress disorder. She might have made it up on the spot, but her performance, while wildly dishonest, was at least entertaining. What really made the night unforgettable was when Toro decided he'd had enough of hearing her voice from across the property line. Whether it was the scent, the sound, or some combination, I never figured out exactly what triggered him, But midway through Amanda's story about how I'd trained Toro to recognize her perfume, a loud metallic crash cut through the chat. A thud followed by the unmistakable groan of splintering wood. Toro had broken the gate. I sprinted toward the noise as Amanda screamed and bolted for her car. Everyone else scattered, unsure if this was some kind of farm-themed entertainment or a genuine emergency. Toro didn't chase anyone. He just stood at the edge of the lot, snorting and pawing the ground like he was staking his claim. I calmed him down before animal control showed up. But Amanda had already posted the whole event on social media, calling it an assassination attempt by livestock. She uploaded it with dramatic music and slow-motion effects, which ironically made her look more like the villain in a nature documentary. Surprisingly, the animal control officers weren't mad. One of them even pulled me aside to ask for a selfie with Toro. Apparently, they'd heard the stories and wanted to see if the bull was really as theatrical as the rumors claimed. After reviewing my camera footage, they saw Toro hadn't charged or crossed the property line. They chalked it up to a busted latch and left with a warning to double-check my fencing. Amanda, of course, was furious. She told the officers I'd trained the bull like some kind of homestead hitman. They didn't take her seriously. If anything, they seemed amused. But I knew Amanda wasn't finished. She never backed down quietly. What caught me off guard was the surveillance. A few days after the incident, I noticed a strange glint near the barn roof. Climbing up, I found a battery-powered camera mounted on a swivel, pointed directly at my property. Amanda had planted it there, probably hoping to catch Toro misbehaving. Instead, I turned it around to film my scarecrow for a few days, then added a sign beneath it that read, "Hope you like watching me weed." The next morning, the camera was gone. A few days later, I found another one disguised inside a fake birdhouse. I took it down and mailed it to the hoe with a note, "Please stop spying on my compost pile." They never responded, but the cameras didn't come back. Amanda tried to escalate again, this time bringing her boyfriend along. He showed up in a BMW that looked like it had never seen a dirt road and carried himself with the self-importance of a man who'd just discovered Wi-Fi in the woods. He introduced himself as a legal consultant, and never actually saying he was a lawyer, but told me Amanda was considering a harassment suit. I should prepare for legal consequences if I didn't restrain Toro. I asked if Amanda planned to stop driving her ATV through my property. "No," he said. Amanda believed she'd established a pattern of use, claiming my field was technically in regulated common land. I asked if he was serious. He said he was drafting a letter. I smiled, handed him a fresh copy of my deed, and wished him luck. Meanwhile, I noticed something new in Toro. He wasn't just reacting to noise anymore. He was watching, thinking, waiting. I'd never seen a bull with that kind of calculation before. He'd stare at the field like he was remembering. Amanda had become part of his routine, part of his daily landscape, and I suspected if she crossed his path again, he wouldn't just stand there. He'd do something. That thought both thrilled and worried me. I didn't want anyone hurt, but I also wasn't about to live with my land turned into someone else's playground. The final push came at the local diner. I was 3 drinks in, minding my own business, when I overheard Amanda bragging about one last ride she planned to take, a big loop for her online followers. She said she'd show that psycho farmer he couldn't scare her off. She waved her phone around, laughing, completely unaware I was within earshot. That was it. No more gnomes, no more trenches. This wouldn't be a prank. It would be a demonstration, one that couldn't be ignored. Toro wasn't a tool. He was a consequence, and Amanda was about to meet him on his terms. It took me 3 days to prepare the field, and not because it had to be elaborate, but because it had to be precise. Toro wasn't a circus act or a scare tactic anymore. He was part of a statement. I mapped out Amanda's usual entry point, lined it with new trail cams, and backed up every inch of footage to the cloud. I reinforced the fencing to keep Toro contained until the right moment, and I installed a custom gate with a remote release I rigged from an old garage door opener and a fishing line pull system. Not high-tech, but it would work. This wasn't just revenge. It was theater. And Amanda, whether she knew it or not, was about to be center stage. The morning of the showdown, I noticed something odd. Amanda wasn't alone. She rolled up to her usual entry point flanked by two ATVs, one carrying a woman in leopard print leggings with a GoPro strapped to her head, the other carrying her boyfriend, legal consultant. The man looked ridiculous in loafers, khakis, and a sport coat that had no business within 30 miles of a soybean field. Amanda was already filming herself with a ring light duct taped to her ATV's front bar, narrating some fake documentary about reclaiming public land. She didn't realize it yet, but the show had already begun. I stood back, hidden behind a stack of hay bales, sipping coffee with Toro chewing grass beside me like a calm bomb waiting to go off. Amanda revved her engine, aimed for the field, and shouted something about not being intimidated. The others laughed, treating it like a joyride. That was my cue. I walked over to Toro, patted his shoulder, and gave him a look. We both understood. Then I pressed the remote. The gate creaked open. Toro didn't charge Yahi. Toro didn't storm forward like some wild monster. Instead, he moved with deliberate purpose, heavy, silent, each hoof sinking into the soft dirt. His eyes locked onto the ATV convoy like he'd been expecting them all along. He cut across the rows, slow at first, moving diagonally, a living shadow drifting through gold. Amanda didn't see him until he was about 30 yards away. The moment she noticed, her expression froze, and her bravado shattered like a twig snapped underfoot. She tried to accelerate, but her front wheels caught in one of the soft trenches I'd dug weeks before. Her ATV jolted, tilted dangerously, and she nearly flipped. The other two skidded to a stop behind her, unsure whether to press forward or retreat. That's when Toro broke into a trot, not a charge. Not yet, but enough to make his sheer mass undeniable. Amanda screamed something about calling animal control. Her boyfriend waved his arms wildly across the field, shouting legal jargon that was swallowed by the thunderous roar of Toro's heavy breath. I stayed silent, letting it play out. Toro kept moving. Amanda tried to reverse, but her wheels spun helplessly in the mud. The woman behind her jumped off her ATV and sprinted for the fence line, slipping twice on the soft earth. The boyfriend was halfway through dialing his phone when Toro stopped just a few feet from Amanda's stalled machine. They stared at each other for a full 10 seconds. Nobody breathed. Then Toro bellowed a deep, primal sound that vibrated through the ground, the kind of roar that sends birds fleeing and makes your spine twitch involuntarily. Amanda released the handlebars, crawled off the ATV, and backed away, hands raised like she was surrendering. She screamed again, this time claiming harassment and threatening to get the sheriff involved. What she didn't know was that the sheriff had already called me the night before, wishing me luck after seeing the last 6 complaints Amanda had filed get tossed like junk mail. Toro didn't move. He slowly led her retreat. Amanda stumbled backward into the boyfriend, who was still yelling into his phone, probably to someone clueless about what to do with a bull and 3 idiots stranded on private farmland. Once they cleared the trench line and stepped back onto the public path, Toro turned and walked back to me as if clocking out after his shift. It was over. But the story wasn't. The cameras had captured every moment in crystal clarity: Amanda's entitled speech, her ridiculous entrance, the scream, the stall, the stare down, and the retreat. No violence, no danger, just consequence. Real, unscripted, undeniable consequence. That afternoon, I anonymously posted the footage on Entitled People Reddit, sharing the backstory and lead up, with names blurred but behavior fully unfiltered. The post blew up within hours. By evening, it had over 1 million views. Comments poured in like wildfire, dubbing Toro the Justice Bull and Amanda the ATV Karen. The backlash was swift. Amanda tried to get ahead of the narrative with her own video, a heavily edited cut where she cried and claimed she was bullied, stalked, and targeted by livestock. She added soft music, captions, and even a dramatic segment staring into the camera saying, "I don't feel safe anymore in this community." But the internet wasn't buying it. They had already seen the raw, unfiltered footage. Comments flooded her post. People shared Toro memes, reenacted the encounter with toy bulls, and started the hashtag #LetTheBullCook. By week's end, Amanda had shut down her social media. According to a neighbor, she quietly moved her ATV to a storage unit across town. Her boyfriend hadn't been seen since, The woman with the GoPro posted a separate apology video, distancing herself and explaining she thought they were just going to ride trails and not provoke a farmer. She admitted Toro's stare gave her nightmares. I almost felt bad for her, almost. The hoe, now facing community embarrassment and legal pressure from multiple property owners, issued a formal statement. They disavowed Amanda's behavior and sent me a letter thanking me for my patience. As a peace offering, they funded a custom metal sign installed at the entrance of my land. It reads, "Private property and no trespassing. Trespassers will be bullied." The sign features Toro standing proudly in profile. It's become a local attraction and people stop to take selfies with it. I never did any of this for fame. I did it for peace, for the right to live on my land without being trampled by noise, disrespect, or the belief that rules don't apply to the loudest voice in the room. Toro, for all his size and fury, never hurt a soul. He just showed up, made his presence known, and sometimes, that's all you need to stop the chaos. Amanda hasn't been back since. My field is quiet now. The crops are growing again. Every morning, Toro and I take a walk along the fence line. He seems calmer these days, like a storm finally passed. I toss him an apple. He flicks his tail. Together, we watch the sun rise without a single engine breaking the silence. The sun rises slowly over the eastern hills, casting long amber streaks across freshly tilled soil. For the first time in months, the morning isn't shattered by the distant roar of an ATV engine. No dust clouds, no sudden revs, no chaos tearing through my rose bushes. Just peace, a silence that hums instead of echoes, that fills you instead of isolating you. It's almost hard to believe it took a one-ton bull and a global internet audience to get it back. But here we are, me, my coffee, and Toro, watching the world wake up, and with not a single Karen in sight. After the viral post hit entitled "People Read It," things snowballed fast. I'd uploaded it under a throwaway username, mostly for catharsis, never expecting it to reach beyond the usual daily drama digest. But something about it struck a nerve, maybe the mix of ridiculous entitlement, rural justice, and the fact my bull stood his ground like a seasoned philosopher fed up with society. Within hours, comments flooded in. People wanted updates, backstory, even merchandise. Someone turned the confrontation into an animated charta with Toro voiced by Morgan Freeman. I didn't know whether to be flattered or worried. The original video spread across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and farming forums. It exploded. Thousands praised the simple solution. Some called it poetic justice. A few even asked if they could visit the field in person. My inbox filled with messages from strangers around the world saying it was the best use of livestock they'd ever seen. And somewhere in the madness, the host started to panic, and not because they cared about my property or the rules, but because their name was trending, and not in a way they liked. Their official website was bombarded with traffic, posts, and memes mocking their prior inaction and favoritism. Local reporters started. Reporters kept sniffing around, asking why a private landowner had to rely on defensive livestock to protect his rights. That's when the letters started arriving. First came a generic, templated apology signed by the HLA president, the same person who had once ignored 3 of my complaints. Then followed a peace offering, a laminated certificate recognizing my commitment to community harmony. I almost framed it as a joke. Next came a more serious message, a formal acknowledgement that Amanda had violated multiple property agreements and was no longer considered in good standing. Word was she quietly left town the week after the video hit 1 million views. Meanwhile, Toro became a local legend. Kids drew chalk pictures of him on sidewalks. Someone dressed up as him for a community costume day, wearing a cardboard box with horns and yelling "No trespassing" like a battle cry. An elderly woman from 2 towns over mailed me a hand-knitted sweater with Toro's face on the front and the phrase "Let the bull cook" stitched down the sleeve. It was completely ridiculous and also the warmest sweater I own. Amanda, for her part, did what most do when the internet turns against them. First, she doubled down, releasing a polished, overdramatic video where she painted herself as a victim of rural aggression, accusing me of manipulating public opinion and twisting the truth for fame. She even tried to rebrand herself as an off-road rights activist, claiming people deserved access to unused land for recreation. No one bought it. Her previous footage had the live stream from her GoPro friend, countless videos from my camera all contradicted her claims. When her ex-boyfriend leaked text messages showing she'd bragged about trashing my fields for weeks, that was the final nail in the coffin. Her social media vanished. Her influence evaporated. She didn't just lose the public, she lost the attention she thrived on. I thought that would be the end of it, but life has a way of stretching consequences further. A few weeks later, a small production company contacted me. They wanted to film a segment about landowner rights and rural justice for a web documentary series. At first, I said no, I didn't want the circus. They insisted it would be respectful, honest, and focus on the legal gray areas that let people like Amanda push boundaries without consequence. Eventually, I agreed on one condition: Toro had to be the center of the story. They came out, filmed for 2 days, and left smiling. The crew even brought apples for Toro, who soaked up the attention like a seasoned celebrity. The episode aired quietly but gained traction. Before long, someone from a national agriculture network reached out to feature Toro in a segment on famous farm animals. I didn't think bulls could blush all, but if they could, Toro would have. Despite the absurdity, life returned to normal in the best way. My fields healed, the crops grew again, my mornings were quiet. Toro settled back into his old routine, watching the hills with that slow, deliberate awareness that made him both terrifying and fascinating. He still walked the perimeter sometimes, not out of aggression, but habit. Maybe, deep down, a little pride too. Because he'd done something most people couldn't, he changed the story. Sometimes I'd get visitors, people driving from nearby towns just to snap a picture of the now iconic sign the Ho had installed as part of their truce. It stood near the main path Amanda once used, gleaming under the sun with polished metal letters that read, "Private property and no trespassing. Trespassers will be bullied." Next to it stood a life-sized steel sculpture of Toro, donated by a local artist who'd seen the viral video. He called it Field Justice. It was crude and rusted but somehow perfect. I never wanted fame. I never wanted trouble. All I wanted was my land, my peace, my morning coffee without entitlement ripping through the earth. Thanks to Toro, I had that again. The final chapter wasn't about revenge or internet clout. It was about restoration, reclaiming space, reminding people that even the quiet ones of those who live off the beaten path and mind their own buzziness have limits. And sometimes those limits come with horns. As summer turned to fall, I walked the field with Toro beside me. The sky was streaked with orange and gold. We didn't speak, obviously, but if I had to guess, Toro felt it too, with the sense that balance had returned, that despite the noise and nonsense, something good had come from it all. He stopped near the old scarecrow post, where Amanda once perched like a confused bird trying to escape her own decisions. I laughed quietly. Toro snorted. The wind rustled through the corn. And in that moment, nothing in the world could touch us. Because peace, after all, isn't always the absence of conflict. Sometimes, it's the presence of a bullet with perfect timing.